Well, welcome along everybody to the June edition of the Landlord Lens. It's a live webinar, as you probably just gathered. And I'm very delighted to be joined by Mr. Ben Beadle, CEO of the NRLA. It's a collaboration between the NRLA and Property Tribes, of which I'm the co-founder and also a full-time residential landlord. And Ben, well, I think you know what today's topic is going to be about because it's everywhere on Property Tribes, so many different types of discussions, but all election 2024. Now, I know you've done a previous webinar on this, but I'm sure we'll put our own inimitable spin on it somehow. But before we get going with that, you and I spent so much time deliberating on the renters reform bill, and poof, it's gone. But how did you feel about it, Ben, when it was dropped?
Yeah, I guess there are lots of people that have been quite pleased to see the back of the renters reform bill, but you've only got to look at the manifesto commitments of the main parties to know that whichever party gets in, it will come bouncing back. It's just in what guise. So I personally, and I know I get some flack for saying this, but I was disappointed that it didn't go through, because it just means more uncertainty for the sector. And what we do know is right up until the last knockings for wash up, actually, with the amendments that we had, I mean, it's academic now, but with the amendments that we had secured around a 6-month moratorium or a 4+2-month moratorium giving notice, student grounds, a review of selective licensing, a number of really, really good things. Actually, the Labour Party did agree to those things, and it makes it even more disappointing that it wasn't selected for the final day's review, because what will happen now is that whichever party gets into power will restart it, and how they restart it depends on, obviously, the colour that gets in.
And also, we should also mention Michael Gove, poof, as well.
There we go. Yeah, absolutely. And whatever your view is on Mr. Gove, he was a phenomenally bright, intelligent politician, a very, very good chap. I enjoyed our discussions. He was really down on the detail, really down on the detail in a way that you don't always get from other MPs when they hold a particular brief. He could put his finger on exactly the issue, which was, but either way, it's academic, isn't it? He's decided that he's going to step down and not seek re-election in July. And again, there will be some out there that are pleased to see the back of him. But the frustration from our perspective is that, having worked very hard to build that relationship and get in and to turn the opinions and views that were being expressed, not fully, but certainly to get him to see things in a different way, in a different light, that did work. We've now got to do that all over again. That's life, isn't it?
It is, really. It's politics. It's starting from scratch again, and getting around those tables where the conversation needs to be had with the right people. It is interesting because Labour have made quite a bold statement that Section 21 will go as soon as they come into power, if they do, because it's not a completely foregone conclusion. So yeah, what exactly does that mean? Because they couldn't exactly just suddenly say Section 21's banned. I don't think they could. It obviously has some kind of process it has to go to. So I'm assuming that means that if they get in, they will immediately start the process of removing Section 21.
Depends how they do it, though, doesn't it? As you say, there's been lots of noise around this issue. I mean, expected. Labour have been very clear about their desire to ban Section 21. So, what I would expect to see is that we have, a very short period of recess over the summer. I mean, it could happen a couple of ways. They can bring forward a short, sharp bill that just deals with Section 21 abolition. But it won't happen on day one. They will start the process of a short, sharp bill and all that entails. But it may not be as far-reaching a bill as the renters reform bill, for example. They may well say, well, look, we just need to deal with this particular issue, and we're going to see this through in the first 100 days, or whatever it happens to be. Or they could bring forward emergency legislation if and things happen much more quickly. And again, this is precisely the reason why we were, I guess, keen to see the renters reform bill with the amendments that we had made, because actually that would be a far more palatable proposition for landlords than a short, sharp bill that just deals with Section 21 abolition, rather than takes into account phasing, court reform, all of that sort of stuff, because I suspect that that's not going to accompany it, even though the issues will still be there.
Well, I think the net result is that it's just more uncertainty for landlords, and
And the sector, and tenants,
and tenants. Yes, very valid point. And it's sorry, go on.
There's a delay on the line, I think, but I was just going to say, it is all about uncertainty. And the thing is, this is a sector, as we've discussed time and time again, this is a sector that has had to live with uncertainty, for years and years and years. And look where it's got us. We've got record high rents, we've got record numbers of people in temporary accommodation, we've got over 1 million people on social housing waiting list. The sector does need some reform. Obviously, we want to make sure that it's reform that doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that recognises the £45 billion contribution that the private rented sector makes to the economy, but recognises that there are some changes that are needed, and that's why I think it was doubly disappointing that the renters reform bill didn't get through on the nod previously, because I guess whatever is going to come our way under a Labour government, if the polls are to be believed, not only are they likely to be less favourable to the ones that were on the table, and I already know that the ones that were on the table weren't received as positively as perhaps the association was receiving them. But of course, if they do get in with a significant landslide, with a significant majority, well, they may be more ambitious in their plans because there isn't anybody else to kind of vote against them.
No, that's true. Let's just remind everybody also that the Q&A is open. If you have any questions for Ben or myself, please do drop them in the Q&A. We'll try and get to as many as we can. This is an interactive webinar. We do appreciate your joining in with your comments, and we'll read out as many of them as we can. So yeah, let's move on to our first, I guess we're going to call this an election special edition of the Landlord Lens. So let's move on to our first trending topic, and it's Sunak pledges tax changes for landlords. Well, yeah, too little too late, Ben, don't you think?
I'm probably going to speak massively out of turn and say,
no, go for it.
I don't think anybody is listening, and you would have seen the comments that we made when that was announced. It is too little too late, and also we mustn't forget who the architects of some of this very damaging stuff has been. It has been the Conservative Party, with their relentless attack on individual landlords. and it hasn't got the sector any further forward. So yeah, a bit, also capital gains tax in itself. Yeah, who wouldn't want to sell to that? I've sold a property to my tenant. Isn't it the most normal thing that you would do if you're in a rented property? It's, particularly if you're on good terms with the tenant, you would have a conversation that says, folks, look, I need to sell because of this, that, and the other reason. I'm going to get it valued. Really appreciate you, facilitating access and viewings and stuff like that. I'm going to give you as much notice as possible. But before I do that, would you be interested in buying it? So, I suspect that is a perfectly normal conversation that goes on. And I would much rather see government, rather than encourage landlords to head to the exit with capital gains tax giveaways, to actually reverse some of the very damaging changes that they have made consistently over the past 5 or 6 years around Section 24 and stamp duty. I mean, that to me would seem to be a no-brainer. Why would you want to encourage landlords to leave the sector at a time of housing shortage?
No, absolutely. And it just shows that they haven't got a handle on the reality of, life at the coalface in the private rented sector. And, it's probably just some kind of election headline to try and fall back in favor with people. But,
Well,
it's very feeble, if you ask me.
I agree, and I suspect actually it's to kind of take one look at what Reform are doing. You may well have seen their manifesto that's been out today that pledges to reverse Section 24 stamp duty. Reverse Section 24 tax changes and have 0% on stamp duty, I think up to £750,000. So, what they are trying to do is to appeal to their broader base, their typical kind of Tory, or if there is such a typical Tory voter, who might have one or two properties to let. Well, I think that ship has sailed. We had a piece of research out. In fact, it was on the day that the election was announced. We did a piece of research with Good Lord and Vouch, and effectively it looked at voter intention across the private rented sector, and it's clear to see that those that are in the PRS feel politically homeless in terms of who they should vote for. And I think this is, last minute kind of afterthoughts on, oh, let's do something for the people that might actually have voted for us. It just shows the sort of state of play that we are in at the moment, because I don't think anyone's going to swallow it particularly.
Mm. We've got two questions here from Brian and anonymous attendee, both sort of concerned that the new government might look to what's gone on in the Welsh private rented sector model in terms of minimum tenancy period, Section 21 abolition, EPCs, etc., Rent Smart Wales type model. That what's gone on in Wales is pretty draconian, and it hasn't raised standards. It's done exactly what always happens, and it's alienated landlords. So yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for landlords because we've mentioned the word uncertainty, but it's almost like we're frozen. We can't do anything much, or a lot of landlords are choosing not to really make any decisions about their portfolios, maybe until after the election, because we just don't know. I mean, Reform in some polls are second in the polls, overtaking the Conservatives, only in one or two, but it seems that there is an appetite for them. We have got a discussion about who's got the landlord vote and why. And it is, well, first of all, most people are not going to vote just in self-interest of oh, I'm a landlord. But I mean, there's not much choice for landlords. I have met Nigel Farage and interviewed him about private sector housing, Ben, long time ago. but I was impressed by his knowledge. And I wondered, have you met anybody from Reform, or have you spoken to Nigel at all about his views?
I've been on his show
Oh, okay.
a number of times. Look, he's a good guy in as much as he can articulate an argument and get it across, with absolute clarity. He's a great speaker,
He is. He is a brilliant speaker.
really clever guy. I wouldn't pretend to say that I share all of his views on life, but I think if the manifesto is anything to go by, in terms of what they've set out today, that will pique a lot of landlords' interest. But of course, the way that the system, the electoral system is kind of geared. I mean, they are only going to have, I don't know, half a dozen MPs kind of max. And I know he's sort of set out his stall that he wants to be a prime ministerial candidate in 2029. So thinking ahead from this election, and you know what, he may well be. I just think he will certainly appeal to a lot of people, but in terms of the voter intention, I would have thought that a lot of people will be thinking about their area and the value that their MP has brought to their area, recognizing that whichever party it is that gets in that area, there's going to be slim pickings for the private rented sector and for landlords. But I still say, that will bring opportunity. The issues of the day are still going to be there on the morning of the 5th of July, for a new government, if it so pans out that way. And so, whilst we may well be attracted by the promises from Reform that are set out, we have to think about the deliverables there. But he's a great guy. He's a passionate and confident public speaker. He's articulate. He puts his finger on the issue in a way that other politicians can't, and he's really credible. He's really credible. But it will be for others to decide.
Well, of course. But yeah, I interviewed him maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. And you can find that interview on Property Tribe's YouTube channel if you'd like to see it. And he does talk, he's definitely got a handle on the issues. Definitely. I was impressed by his knowledge, and as you say, Ben, the way he articulated his views. He's a good speaker. Let me see. Cornell has said, do you think that rent caps may be introduced at any time? And if so, what impact do you believe they would have on the private sector for landlords? He is concerned that they would likely affect your ability to borrow, obviously because rent supporting buy-to-let borrowing, and also potentially property values as well. So any views on the spectre of rent caps?
Yeah, well, I mean, if there's one thing that I look at the Labour Party manifesto with an air of trepidation about, it is the kind of devolution of things to local mayors. That's what they have set out. Now, the Labour Party have been clear that they don't support rent caps. They don't support it in Wales. Lisa Nandy has said it previously. They distance themselves a little bit from Steve Khan, who calls for rent cap on an almost hourly basis. But it could be that if you follow this sort of devolution path, maybe we don't have national rent control, but maybe we have some element of localized rent pressure zones. But that's speculation. Either way, you could argue it's good news for landlords, because everywhere that has seen rent control shows that, take Scotland, for example, they have the highest rent growth in the UK. So I think it would encourage perverse behaviour, in as much as I think landlords that don't normally put their rents up would put their rents up because they feel threatened by it. I do think it will impact investor appetite, not just from individuals, but from corporates as well. But moreover, I don't think it solves the fundamental issue at play that if you want to increase supply, the worst way is to choke it off with a ridiculous failed ideology like rent control.
Mm.
So I think we have to be careful what we wish for. We want to make sure that we're at the table when it comes to these discussions and pointing out the errors and of countries that have followed this well-trodden and failed path, and actually get round to the real issue of today, which is housing supply and how you increase supply of all tenures. Now, Labour have been very clear that they want to invest in social housing and build 1.5 million homes over the course of the next parliament. Well, you require investor confidence in order to do that. Rent control does not do that.
Mm.
And we must remind ourselves that actually government's own statistics show that landlords, over 70% of landlords never increase their rent in tenancy from the date of finding a new tenant. So we have to tread very carefully. And that's a role that the NRLA will play with others in making these coherent arguments about.
Good, good. Well, I was going to ask you actually, I mean, we are in that build up to the election. There's all the campaigning going on. Are you still able to have conversations with politicians during this build up? Are you still able to be a voice for landlords? Are you still able to try and, influence the conversation? Or is there anything you can do during the next few weeks? Or are
Yeah,
you simply waiting to see who's going to be in number 10?
but we've been backing a number of horses for a little while now. So a lot of our groundwork has been done. Of course, if it is a Labour administration, that will work very differently to a Conservative administration. The issues and challenges will still be. Yes, we are still speaking with people, but of course, those people are out knocking on doors now and reminding local constituents around the value that they've had in their communities for the past 4 or 5 years. So of course, we are at a different phase. But now that all of the manifestos are out, we will be publishing our wish list to various people, which we will be publishing in the next couple of weeks or so, and be ready for whatever administration takes up power, and be ready to engage and to make sure we communicate the voice of the sector, because the sector is doing an excellent job. It has many detractors, but without the sector and without responsible landlords picking up where successive governments have failed when it comes to social housing, they will be up a well-known creek without a paddle. And so it is important that whilst a new administration might be emboldened by a large majority, they still need the sector to function, and they still need individuals and investors to have confidence, because those 1.5 million homes aren't going to build themselves. Government doesn't put bricks in the ground. They rely on investors to do it, and investors need confidence in order to do it. And let's be clear, that 1.5 million target is not a new target. It's simply a restatement of the existing target that the last administration, or the current administration, Freudian slip, has failed to meet.
Indeed. Well, there's actually another entity that needs their views taken into account, in my opinion, and that is the lenders,
Yes.
because as we know, the buy-to-let mortgage was born out of the advent of the assured short-hold tenancy and Section 21, which enabled lenders to gain possession of a property where the landlord had stopped paying the mortgage for considerable amount of time. Lenders want the surety of getting a property back as well. I know that, they have their industry bodies that lobby the government as well. But, we're always saying this, Ben, there's so many different stakeholders in our sector with different needs, and it needs to be gone into with a lot of detail, because I always remember when I was speaking to Ian Duncan Smith, Clang, sorry, just dropped a name there. But he said, I was walking with him to the stage to do something, and I said, what do you think of section 24? And he said, Vanessa, he said, George Osborne tweaked too many levers. And he's right, because if you tweak something here, something happens over here, and there's the kind of collateral damage. And I think that's part of the problem that we've had with successive governments, is that they haven't had a global view of the private rented sector and all the different interested parties in it, and they've made these policies with perhaps not fully understanding what damage that they could do. And I can't see that changing anytime soon, unfortunately.
No, I would probably share that, and I think share that view, and I think that certainly what we have seen from Labour in terms of their manifesto and the commitment around ending Section 21, which I do believe that they will do and enact fairly soon. Obviously, that's not going to be contingent on a number of other things in the way that the Renters Reform Bill was. And that's a classic example, I think, of where actually, yes, Section 21 going, okay, is not ideal for landlords, but actually, if you have an alternative system that you can rely upon, fine. And that's what we've always argued. Well, actually, we run the risk now of just having Section 21 abolished. What does it mean for the fixed term? What does it? There are all these other kind of things, and so the one thing I would say is, we have a very good relationship with UK Finance, for example.
Which is the overarching body for all of the lenders. Yeah.
And so them amplifying their voice to our concerns. This is an important part of what we do, is to not just kind of lobby for landlords' concerns directly, but also to sound out, well, what are lenders thinking about this? What does that mean for their risk appetite? What does it mean for their propensity to lend, and all of that sort of stuff? Because actually, if we can build an argument, with a number of different stakeholders, you've got much, greater chance of being able to affect change. And so, people may not see that in from the outside looking in, but those are exactly the types of conversations that we're having day in, day out.
And such important conversations as well. Now, we do know that Labour are interested in continuing with energy efficiency in rental homes, and that EPC standards, will come back into the frame. I don't think that's too much of a surprise. We know that is the direction of travel pretty much for all political flavours, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. And again, there are a lot of people that said the Conservatives were doing a good thing by binning the EPCC by 2025, 2028. We were slightly more circumspect about this, and again, kind of being proved right, because I suspect that, I think it's 2030 that they've set out in their manifesto. What we don't have any detail of is, whether there are to be any incentives, what the cap might be, how it's going to work. All of the same bloody questions, Vanessa, that we had, back when we were talking about 25, 2028. And so, personally, I would have preferred Go to have come out and said, right, well, let's get you to D by 2028, and that would have been probably a more helpful step forward. But we are where we are, and it just shows you, I think, that you can't, getting things kind of cancelled in that way is a win, a win in the moment, but won the battle, lost the war, I guess.
Yeah, exactly that.
Is that example, and that sort of nuance is what I know it annoys a lot of people. Why doesn't Beadle come out and say this? Why doesn't Beadle come out and welcome that or whatever? Well, I'm taking kind of a longer term view on these things, so I know they're going to come boomeranging back.
Well, Ben, I mentioned the word global overview earlier, and that's something that you have to take. You do have to see the bigger picture for everybody involved, and I think it's so important that you've got that, and it's so necessary that somebody with that view and the very in-depth knowledge and experience of being a landlord as well is part of the conversation. So, I mean, your work, I think the work that you're doing is just more important than ever now. And I know there's a lot of people that do appreciate you, Ben, a lot.
That's most kind. I appreciate that, Vanessa. But I am first and foremost a landlord. I have a couple of my properties at EPCD. I've got a couple of licenses. One without a license that doesn't need a license. All of these things.
Yeah.
I'm kind of living out in the day to day. In fact, the reason my phone was going off is I've got an empty property at the moment. My dad's very kindly agreed to move a sofa bed for me because the guy didn't turn up to do it, so he's putting that in the back of his car. That's what that noise is. So my day is very typically being a landlord and juggling this, and it does mean that a lot of the problems, well, all of the problems, in fact, that members and non-members are experiencing, they apply to me as much as they do to anybody else.
Indeed. We've got another question, which I think is an interesting one. It's an anonymous attendee. Will landlords become even more of a sitting target for raising income to pay for government spending by making taxation even more detrimental, whether that be CGT, IHT, gifting, etc.? Will landlords become a target to reduce wealth inequalities, resulting in making landlords poorer? Well, I don't think landlords are, certainly the typical landlord in the UK with 3 or 4 properties. We're not, we're not actually exceedingly wealthy. Yes, it's nice to have more than one property, but we know that buy-to-let is such a long-term investment, and it is unfortunate that there's some sort of urban myth that all landlords are driving Ferraris and holidaying in the Caribbean, etc. Because I've been in it 20 years and I sure ain't doing that. I
Well,
knew you've been down to Nice recently, haven't you?
I have been down to Nice, but it's certainly not the Caribbean. And I certainly wasn't in a Ferrari. Yeah. I'm going to keep my comments brief on this because I promised my policy team that I will try and keep and toe the line a little bit more readily in the run up to the election than I do normally. And just say to that person who asked that question, what do you think?
Good. Critical thinking, very important. Let's well, we're kind of well into the webinar now. We still welcome your questions. We've got over 100 people on the webinar, and we would love to hear more from you, what your views, who you think is the best party for landlords, that kind of thing. But I thought we'd just wrap up, Ben, with a final kind of non-election trending topic, because it's quite, I know you've done a lot on the election. I'm sure you'll do a lot more. So we have got a wonderful trending topic on Property Tribes, which I think is a great question. And it's landlords, how did you scale up? And it's a newbie asking how landlords that got to maybe 100, 200, 500 properties, how they managed to do it. And I do think it's interesting because what we as landlords were able to do with the financial products that were around at the time certainly in the early 2000s, it's just not possible to do that now because those financial products no longer exist. So it is a lot harder now to scale up unless you've got a massive cash pot to start with. And I don't know what you think, Ben, but we're probably no longer going to see very, very large portfolio landlords. I think we're going to see more of the 2 to 4 type portfolio landlords, just because it's so much more cash intensive than, maybe 20 years ago. And the financial products aren't just there, to help you really scale up quickly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and this came home for me over the weekend actually. So I've got a remortgage coming up on one of my student houses, and in fact, it remortgages 1 month away, with the end of this month, end of June, and got given a rate, I think, of 5.3 or 5.4%, something like that. And it's basically a product switch, which is what I've been doing, 2-year product switches. And I read down, and the reversion rate, if I didn't switch, was 9.59%. And
Wow.
I didn't, when I came into this, I was 20, so half half a lifetime ago, sadly. And I scaled up. I've only got 8. I don't fall into the big boy category, but scaled up by simply buying saving a pot of money, getting a mortgage, remortgaging, taking some out, doing the next one, and now I'm kind of paying them down. But it just struck me that I don't think that is available now, and not least with the kind of interest rates that you see. So I do think, yeah, I wouldn't like to be kind of considering my investment strategy in housing now,
Mm.
if that made sense, unless I had incredibly deep pockets where I wasn't kind of reliant so much on mortgages,
Mm.
or had a sizable uh, deposit or cash to play with. I just think it's a whole different ball game now.
It totally is. I mean, back in the day, 20, 25 years ago, we had much higher loan to values as well. And we had these lovely, wonderful things which no longer exist anymore, called gifted deposits, where you could use the discount as a deposit. And I may have told this story before, and forgive me if I did, but I bought a 4-bed luxury townhouse in High Wycombe with a 90% mortgage. I negotiated a 10% discount. It was a new build direct from the developer. And I used the 10% discount as the deposit, and I negotiated for the developer to pay the stamp duty as well. So that property cost me about £1,000 to acquire, in legal fees. And why didn't I buy 4? But I didn't. I only bought the one, and I just wish I had done, because literally 3 weeks after I completed, that product disappeared. But I'm very fortunate that property was on the market for 330,000. So I negotiated a 10% discount, used that as a deposit, and I've just remortgaged it, and it's was valued at 550,000. So I mean, it was a window of opportunity, but it is such a different ball game now, Ben, and I do think it's harder. It does take more cash. My personal feeling is, I think the buy, refurbish, refinance, rent out model is probably one of the best to scale up, because you buy a property at a discount, and you do buy it with cash or bridging and or both, and you force the appreciation through refurbishment and or development, and then you take out a 75% loan to value mortgage of the enhanced new market value, and you should be able to pull back most of your cash. So that enables you to redeem your bridge or your own cash, and then go again. And I think that's probably one of the best kind of strategies for scaling up now. Otherwise, it's a case of buying somewhere, and sitting on it for many, many years and allowing the equity to accrue, and then trying to release equity and go again. But it's certainly a lot more challenging now.
It is, and what we're also, that's just the mechanics of the finances, right?
Mm,
Actually, if you then take into account the operating environment, that's something that you're going to have to be comfortable that is going to be changing, and you've got to be comfortable or not. But you've got to do your due diligence when it comes to these. The sector is going to undergo a significant period of change. Whether we like it or not, it is going to feel very, very different. And that doesn't mean that rewards won't be there. It just means it's going to be a bit harder.
mm. Well, Idris has asked a question. He says, I'm new to property investment with only one property. Well done. That's a great start. He said, can we talk more about purchase lease options? How do you get a property by using this strategy? Um, well, Idris, first of all, lease options are very well known and very well used and accepted in commercial property, far less so in residential property. They are not, buy a property for £1. Let's be clear on that. That's just marketing hype, usually, to get people to buy property education courses. The thing that nobody really says about lease options, which I think you need to be aware of, is that when the lease option completes and you want to purchase the property, it is highly likely you will have to buy it for cash because lenders do not like being associated with lease options. And if they find out a lease option is involved, it's very likely they'll decline to lend. So lease options, if you think about it like that, they don't actually help you buy property for no money because you won't be able to buy them with a mortgage when you come to the end of the lease option term. There's they're long-term arrangements, they can go wrong. If the contract breaks down, do you have the money to enforce the contract legally? It can cost tens of thousands of pounds. So you can probably tell, unfortunately, I'm not a fan of them. And I think property is a cash intensive business, and the very term investment means putting money into something. If you don't put money into something, you're actually not investing. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Ben.
Well, Vanessa, as you know, I'm a very vanilla kind of guy when it comes to investments and wouldn't touch it with a barge pole.
You were much more concise than me. Excellent. Okay, sorry, Anna Carter just says, sorry, Ben, would you mind just clarifying where we are with the EPC legislation currently? Have the 2025 and 2028 deadlines been scrapped for now?
Yes,
Okay.
they have been scrapped for now, and yeah. So basically, you've got to make sure that your property is kind of F and above, or sorry, yeah, F and above in order to rent it. So there's no change. What we're talking about is kind of the stuff in the manifestos where various parties are committing to bringing that back in. So there's no changes, but I expect there to be change.
Oh, I've got a great question here just popped up from Cornell. I've got to squeeze it in. Do you believe selective licensing schemes are cure or con? Lewisham Local Authority are introducing the scheme on the 1st of July. He's a fully compliant landlord and his tenants wax lyrical about him being such a great proactive landlord. Now he needs to cough up another 600 for sending Lewisham all his usual certificates, etc. So Ben, selective licensing, cure or con?
You're trying to wind me up now. You know this is my pet hate. I will characterize it as this. I'm not a fan of selective licensing. I can't see that there has been any any degree of kind of improvement in standards when it
Your
comes.
dad again.
Yeah, my phone's ringing. Apologies, be shot. Um, uh, no, it's a you've only got to look at what the local government association said, who were very worried about Gove's review of selected licensing because they were worried that they wouldn't be able to fund things if it was abolished in some way. That tells you, in my view, that licensing is little short of a scam.
So as we stand here on the 17th of June at 16:47, Ben, it just seems like we've basically just had a reset before the Renters Reform Bill, and all the same issues are back up in the air, up for grabs. Let's just hope that we have some new and positive thinking, whoever gets into the ministry hot seat for housing. It's so needed. And it's just very hard to know how to move forwards with this hanging over us. Well, we're pretty much coming to the end now, and before we go, I just wanted to give the heads up for the National Residential Landlord Association National Conference on the 6th of November. Yeah, it's only June, but boy, is the time going quickly, and it'll be upon us before we know. Ben, it's really building on the success of last year's event, which I was fortunate enough to attend. It's this time at the Birmingham NEC, and you've already got a keynote speaker. It's a dragon. No, it's not me. It's not me. It's Mr. James Kahn. And yeah, you've got Nick Knowles as the host as well.
Yeah,
So now
SOS.
so now's the time really, I think, for people to think about getting their tickets, because it sold out last time, didn't it?
It did, yeah, and we hope it's going to be another great event. Last year's surpassed all expectations, so we've gone slightly bigger at the NEC. James Kahn will kind of bring a different focus in terms of technology, which is an area that the NRLA is very keen on, to make sure that we're leveraging as much of this sort of prop tech stuff as we can lay our hands on to make life easier for landlords, but also to make sure that we are able to showcase the private rented sector as being a force for good. And I hope that we will be getting some political big guns, like we did last year, to the conference to be able to answer members' questions. So yeah, we've sold a couple hundred tickets already. So book up if you can.
I do think the politicians being there, it does add completely another dynamic to it. It gives it another kind of level of energy, doesn't it? It's actually quite exciting certainly when Michael Gove popped up on the video screen and he was there looking at, I don't know, over 1,000 landlords. It felt really good to have that connection with the politicians. Yeah, I shall be looking forward to it. It is the 6th of November at the Birmingham NEC. I think I'm right in saying there's some early bird ticket offers as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there are. Go to the website. You'll see on the homepage all of the details about the conference itself. It's just a great opportunity to put landlords and the PRS on that pedestal, because if we don't shout about the good work that we're doing, then no one's going to do it for us. And I think the political implications of getting some big hitters there shouldn't be understated. I'm really hopeful that we're going to get a few along. So yes, watch this space.
Indeed. So head to the website for your conference tickets, and also, Ben, just to let everybody know that you do have a kind of election hub on the NRLA website as well, and there's a lot of news and insights and manifesto information and all that good stuff as well, isn't there? Great resource.
There is member-only stuff. Keep up to date with everything that's going on with the manifestos, with the elections, our asks, and what happens post the 4th of July.
Wow. Well, I don't know when we're going to reconvene, Ben, but I think when we
It'll
do,
have to be sooner. It'll have to be shortly after the election because I suspect.
it will be when we have a new government in place. And it will be a very interesting conversation, as they always are with you. And thank you so much to everybody that's joined us on this afternoon's webinar, the June edition of the Landlord Lens. We've got the solstice in 4 days. I can't believe where the year's going. It's flying by, but I hope everything is good in your landlord world, wherever you are. Ben, thank you so much as always. And are you going to be out and about at any events on the Landlord Trail?
Yes, I'm at the Landlord Investor Show on the 3rd of July, doing a seminar there.
Oh, yes, I shall see you there.
Yes, at Billingsgate. So yes, we'll get another selfie and look forward to seeing as many people there as possible.
Okay, well, thank you to everybody for watching. We'll see you somewhere down the property trail, but it's bye for now.
See ya.